Welcome back to Sometimes Love Isn't Enough. I am your host, Angie Grant, and in this podcast, we really dive into real parenting struggles. Sometimes I share stories of my parenting journey as a bio and adoptive mom or as a grandma now. And I really reflect on what my journey has been like, what I've learned along the way, and of course, some mistakes that I've made as well. And the topic that I want to talk about today is this concept of perfectionism. When I think about me as a human, as a parent, being a perfectionist isn't something that I actually ever would have contributed or attributed to part of my personality. I wouldn't have called myself a perfectionist. I do hold high standards for myself and the work that I do, the work that I put out in the world, the way that I show up, my work ethic. I like my house to look nice. Um, and I'm also okay with messy. And so I honestly never would have considered myself, like I said, to be a perfectionist. Yet there's something in the way that I'm designed, the way that I show up, the way that I've been conditioned to be that holds me back. So recently, I was listening to some trainings, and they're all about how we are as leaders. And I think as a parent, that is the ultimate role in leadership that we could ever possibly take. We are here to be stewards for our kids, for their energy, to create a space where they get to flourish into whoever they're supposed to be. When I think back through the way that I was raised in previous generations, I think that concept of being a parent as a leader was looked at very differently. I think back to several decades ago. I think leadership in parenting really meant that we had control over the kids. We had control over our home, right? And I don't think that that part has necessarily changed, but I think that control, at least how I look at it now, as I've evolved my view of relationships and parenting and what our kids are here to do, I think that that control over our kids has shifted a ton in my heart. I don't think I'm here to control the kids, although it is nice to have a bit of order. And we are here to teach our kids, but I think our role is to create a safe space, help our kids learn safety, but within a very flexible container in a way that allows our kids the flexibility to be who they are, not who they've been taught to be, conditioned to be, who they think they need to be to fit into somebody else's mold. But I do think that that is where that concept of perfectionism comes from. As I had said, I've been listening to this leadership coach, and I I can't get it out of my head, which is why I wanted to bring it here to you, is this concept of perfectionism not being a personality trait. We aren't born to be perfectionists. At least I don't think so. I do think that there are elements in our design that may lead us energetically to lean more towards perfectionism than not. However, the way that she describes it is that it's it's actually a nervous system response. That when we're in this space of perfectionism, it isn't about a, type A personality. It's more about us trying to stay safe, trying to feel safe, trying to feel okay and avoid criticism or ridicule. When I think about this concept of being a perfectionist in parenting, and I think about if if we look at perfectionism through this lens, that it isn't a personality trait, but rather a nervous system response. And when we think about, you know, we, we've all learned, right, that our nervous system has this core set of ways that it responds to perceived threat. For some, or in some circumstances, it's fight. Sometimes it's flee, fight, fight, flight, or freeze, right? Those are the three core ones that we often hear about. But one that is less talked about is the fawn response. And the fawn response is when we engage in behaviors that are delightful, that are appreciated, that receive praise from others. Because when we are engaging in behaviors, displaying behaviors that get a positive response from others, we feel safer. So you apply that concept to perhaps a young child who is in the midst of maybe an abusive relationship. And that child will quickly learn that if I'm good, I won't endure more abuse. If I engage in behaviors that appease my abuser, I'm less likely to be abused. It is a trauma response. But our nervous system doesn't know the difference necessarily between criticism that hurts us at our core and running from a tiger, right? Not that we would use the fawn response with a tiger, but you get the point, right? When our nervous system is activated and responding to a perceived threat, it doesn't think through whether or not that threat is real. It doesn't, our nervous system doesn't have the ability to think through whether or not that threat can actually do physical harm to us. It just reacts to what it perceives as a threat. So when we apply this concept to parenting and we think about, when we think about the impact that social media has had on parenting and how there is this expectation of perfection on social media. There's this expectation that you have the best toys for your kids and the cutest clothes and the biggest, most extravagant gender reveals and birthday parties and, um, you know, uh, promposals and all of the things that our society has created as these expectations upon us. And the fear that our body holds when we can't create what we've perceived to be the expectation, right? Our mind can say, oh, I don't give a you know what about what anybody thinks about me. But our nervous system is responding to that fear of ridicule, that fear of not being good enough, which can be tied all the way back to your own childhood when you were little and perhaps were criticized for not being good enough, not doing it the way that somebody else wanted you to. And then fast forward 20 years and you're a mom with, a child that you're raising in this social media lifestyle where the the level that is expected of parents who are leaders in their home with their kids, the the expectations have gotten so high that it totally makes sense to me that perfectionism and that desperate drive to be the best, to present that we're doing the very best, it just makes so much sense now as I wrap my head around it that this is what perfectionism looks like now. It is a nervous system response in our body to try to avoid ridicule, to try to avoid shame and embarrassment, or the comment at the birthday party about, oh my gosh, I can't believe you didn't do, dot, 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 fill in the blank. So, what do we do about this, right? We're not going to change the world of social media. That is not on my agenda. But we do get to shift the way that our body is responding to this, right? Our nervous system, although it is designed to react without us thinking, We do have powerful tools that we can use to help shift the way that our nervous system is responding. We weren't born reacting to the fear of ridicule of our social media posts or how well we did with our gender reveal, right? We weren't born with that. Our nervous system was conditioned to react to that based on based on the messages that our nervous system was given about the fear of not being good enough. And so, if this is something that our nervous system has been taught, well, we can teach it something new. We can teach our nervous system a different way of responding, a different way of, of showing up for you in a way that helps you be the leader for your kids, for your family, instead of being a victim to whatever is happening in life, or instead of being a victim to reacting to this unseen pressure. So, if this resonates with you, if you find yourself taking action out of perhaps fear, then let's dig into a couple of really practical tools that you can use to help shift that response. I had this thought as I was just sharing that with you that over the weekend, I met with a friend of mine, Katie Jones. She interviewed here on the podcast a while back. And we were just chatting about life and chatting about growth and evolution. And she said something to me that I want to share it with you because I find it so powerful. But Katie said that she sees that as humans, we really have two emotional responses, and that's it. Just two. And those two responses are fear and love. When we think about sadness, right, it often is tied to a fear of loss or, some other type of fear. We can equate our negative emotions back to some type of fear. But when we can notice that fear and acknowledge it for what it is, thank it for showing up, thank it for reminding us that we're human and that this isn't all supposed to be so easy, right? When we can notice the fear, thank it, acknowledge it, not stuff it or hide it or run from it, but really acknowledge it face to face, and then make a conscious decision to choose to move forward with love instead of fear, everything changes for us. So I wanted to share that with you because I felt like it just tied in so beautifully to this concept of perfectionism and our nervous system and how it's all tied together, right? That concept of fear. We all have different fears that we face. Our fears. Of course, we have fears based on our lived experiences. We have fears that are etched into our DNA that are passed down from generation to generation to generation, right? That fear of not enough, I believe, is etched into our DNA from past generations who didn't have enough. And even though, hopefully, as you listen to this, you have more than enough, even though you know that, you see that, you experience it, it is etched in your DNA to have a fear of not being enough, which leaves us in the scarcity mindset, this fear of lack, right? But we all have fears. Some of them are part of our design. I have it in my design in a few different gates that are really key to my evolution, but I have this fear of inadequacy, fear of not being good enough. And when I think about that idea of perfectionism, of course, I have perfectionistic traits because inadequacy is interwoven in my story time and time and time again. I just don't see it, right? I don't see that perfectionism. And yet, my need to prove that I'm good enough is my perfectionism, and it holds me back again and again and again and again. So when we're able to identify what our unique fears are, fears passed down through generations, fears of what we've experienced in our life, fears as they're outlined in your chart, that noticing what our actual fears are and having a conversation with them, really noticing them, talking to them, or journaling on them, meditating on them, whatever your practice is, but to not stuff them or ignore them or run from them anymore. To notice our unique fears and then to do something about it, right? For some, perhaps the journaling, the meditation, the conversation with your fears is all that you needed. But for some of us, where those fears are just so deeply woven into every thread of our being, when they're woven into our energy and they show up time and time and time again, and they manifest themselves in our body and our aches and our pains, when your fear is deep, then perhaps using a tool like EFT tapping is something that can be powerful in helping you to acknowledge that fear and release it. For some of us, it's working with a therapist or a coach. I know that EMDR has a powerful way of helping us to let go of those traumas that are so deeply seated into the way that our body, our mind, our heart experiences life. So for some, the practical tools, I know this may sound silly, but for some, the tool to let go of that perfectionism, as I now see it as being a nervous system response, for some, the tools are therapy or are EMDR. But at the end of the day, it's about choosing what's right for you and making a decision that you don't want fear to run the show anymore. You don't want perfectionism to run the show anymore. Because when we're stuck in that loop of perfectionism, we're not being present. We might be taking steps in being present for moments, but when we're so focused on that fear, when we're so focused on that outcome, we're really missing that deep connection that is meant to be happening in the moment. So, I would love to hear your thoughts about this episode. I'd love to hear what comes up for you when you think about your perfectionism, when you think about your role as a leader in your family, when you think about how fear is the underlying current of your perfectionism, and quite frankly, all of the things that are holding you back. I would love to hear your thoughts about all of that. So, there's so many ways you could connect with me. Find me on all the social medias at Connected Parents with Angie, or check out my website, angiegrant.com. Of course, all of these links are in the show notes. And when you're ready to start tackling your fears, it is something that I specialize in, and I would love to help you work through your fears, use EFT, use human design to help shed those layers that are no longer serving you. It would be such a gift to help you along that path. So when you're ready, I'm here. And until then, we will talk soon.